Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague Ollie Barrett in London. Good to have you with us, Ollie.
Great to be with you, Shubhendu, as ever. It's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe, coming up in the next half hour. We've got the latest from the UK, which is on alert for more disorder. The race for the White House heats up and trying to make hacking harder. First, the headlines.
UK on alert, braces for more riots across the country, over 400 arrested. UK Prime Minister vows action amid anti-immigration protests. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, appointed head of interim government in Bangladesh, says, "Let us make the best use of our new victory." In a major setback, Vinesh Fogart disqualified from Paris Olympics ahead of gold medal wrestling bout. Prime Minister asked IOA President PT Usha to lodge protests. In Bangladesh, after a major reshuffle on Tuesday at the top level in the army, new authorities have reconstituted the police force as well of the country on Wednesday. The new regime replaced the Additional Inspector General of Police, Muhammad Harun al-Rashid, as Director General of Rapid Action Battalion with AKM Shahidur Rahman. Muhammad Mainul Hassan has been appointed as the new Commissioner of Dhaka Metropolitan Police. On Tuesday night, a meeting was held at Banga Bhavan among President Muhammad Shahabuddin, three chiefs of the armed forces and coordinators of the anti-discrimination student movement. They decided to make Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus the head of the interim government. Besides this, Bangladesh Nationalist Party BNP has announced to hold a rally in front of its Neapolitan central office on Wednesday. Meanwhile, non-essential staff and families from the High Commission of India in Dhaka have returned to India on Wednesday via a commercial flight. Indian diplomats and officials continue working as High Commission of India in Dhaka remains functional. External Affairs Minister S. Shankar on Tuesday said India is looking forward for the situation to stabilize. Moving on, in the United Kingdom, far-right attacks and violent disorder continues across several cities, prompting some countries, including India, to issue travel warnings. The unrest was triggered by last week's knife attack that killed 3 children in the town of Southport. The riots broke out following false reports spread online about the origin of the attacker. In many ways, the attacks are targeted on immigrants, but it's not the United Kingdom alone. Similar trends of far-right violence is being observed in the rest of Europe as well. The latest, in fact, coming in from the UK is that the country is on alert, is bracing for more riots across the country. Over 400 arrests have been made so far. UK Prime Minister has vowed to take action against the rioters. That's the update that is coming in the United Kingdom. Far-right attacks and violent disorders continue across several cities. It's not the UK alone. Similar trend of far-right violence is being observed in the rest of Europe as well. We'll connect with our correspondent in Berlin in just a bit to get an update on that macro situation, the manner in which similar situation is unfolding in Europe, that in a bit from now. Meanwhile, UK is on alert against more riots. Let us turn to my colleague Ollie Barrett in London, who gets us more on this and other stories. Ollie, what is the latest on the riot situation? Well, right, we're going across to Ollie Barrett in London, who will fill us in with the latest updates as far as the riot situation in UK is concerned. The British police braced for further riots across England. According to reports, at least 30 protests could be witnessed on Wednesday. Police sources say nearly 6,000 officers have been mobilized for maintaining law and order. Further, MPs with offices near the locations of planned demonstrations have already been warned by Parliament's security team about possible disorder. They've also been asked to consider working from home. Those are the updates coming in from the United Kingdom. This comes as Prime Minister Keir Starmer convened his second emergency coordination meeting with police chiefs on Tuesday. Starmer said he's now expecting substantive sentencing of rioters within days. So far, authorities have made over 400 arrests and filed charges against more than 100 people in relation to the recent riots.
400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week. That should send a very powerful message to anybody involved, either directly or online, that you are likely to be dealt with within a week, and that nobody, but nobody, should be involving themselves in this disorder.
With a wave of violence escalating, leader of the right-wing Reform Party, Nigel Farage, has said that he was not responsible for inciting violent protest. In an interview, Farage added that he himself faces security concerns as results of criticism of his comments on the Southport killings. He said he believed that different communities in the UK face different treatment by the police on the basis of their race.
At no point in the last week or in the previous 30 years have I ever encouraged the use of violence? Have I ever encouraged the use of anti-democratic means? And yet, you know, you get the internet and people saying things on the internet. I have had nothing to do with any form of street violence now or at any point in my career.
Let's now go across to my colleague Ollie Barrett in London to get the latest as far as the riot situation is concerned. Ollie, over to you.
Thank you, Shubhendu. And yes, we were hearing from Nigel Farage there, who has been facing ongoing pressure over the disorder here in the UK and has been setting out his defence. And before that, we were hearing from Keir Starmer. And when he talks about robust sentencing, he hopes that that will prove a deterrent in the days ahead. And we can go to DD India's Stuart Smith now in London for more on this story. And Stuart, these 30 plus possible locations that we've been hearing about for protests of some sort later today, what kind of places are these?
Well, they mostly appear to be organisations linked to immigrants, refugees and asylum seekers, with one of the phrases used on that circulating graphic saying no more immigration on it, which has led to some lawyers around the country reporting to British media that they have been threatened. They're keeping some staff at home on Wednesday and they've boarded up office windows in anticipation of any possible violence. The Law Society, which represents legal professionals in the UK, says there isn't much we can really advise except don't go to work and don't meet clients, but how long, it asks, can they really advise people to do that? The government has said it is concerned about the disorder that could happen tonight. The Communities Minister said earlier that at this point they don't know if such disorder will transpire, as we've seen in the previous week, or whether it's just a list intended to provoke or to cause alarm. But the Communities Minister says the police, the courts and the prosecution are ready. Unverified sources suggest that 6,000 police are on standby across the country to take on any possible disorder, and the Met says it will use every power. London's police force, the Met, says it will use every power, tactic and tool available to prevent further scenes of disorder. Now, one of the tactics the Prime Minister has been advocating for is swift justice, fast sentencing, and we saw the first prison sentences handed down earlier today in Liverpool Crown Court. One of those jailed for 3 years, sentenced to prison for 3 years for for violent disorder and assault of an emergency worker. The judge said that this man had been part of a group involved in a deeply racist chants. Another has received 2.5 years after being caught on CCTV lighting a police van on fire, and another one, part of a crowd of around 100, prosecutors said, who were throwing rocks and bricks, sentenced to 20 months in prison. Whether that will make any difference to whether rioters come out or not on Wednesday evening, we'll have to wait and see.
We will indeed. Thank you, Stuart Smith in London. Well, next to the race for the White House, and US Vice President Kamala Harris has unveiled her Democratic running mate, Tim Walz, and they've held a joint appearance as they kick off a multi-day tour of battleground states aimed at introducing Walz to the national stage.
US Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, made their first public appearance together at a rally in Philadelphia on Tuesday.
Since the day that I announced my candidacy,
Harris devoted much of her speech introducing Walz to the audience.
The day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. A leader who will help unite our nation and move us forward. A fighter for the middle class. A patriot who believes, as I do, in the extraordinary promise of America. A promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not just for some, but for all. So, Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader.
Tim Walz revved up the crowd for the rigorous campaign to come ahead. He hit the ground running as he went after Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance.
I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
The Trump campaign too didn't waste time launching a counterattack, labeling Walz as a far-left liberal. Vance said Walz was on the far left of the Democratic Party and chosen because Harris was a radical herself.
Obviously, the big news of the day is that Tim Walz has been nominated as the VP, or is now the presumptive nominee, I should say, for Kamala Harris. My view on it is it just highlights how radical Kamala Harris is. This is a person who listened to the Hamas wing of her own party and selecting a nominee. This is a guy who's proposed shipping more manufacturing jobs to China, who wants to make the American people more reliant on garbage energy instead of good American energy, and has proposed defunding the police just as Kamala Harris does.
Walz grew up in a small town in Nebraska. He was a teacher, coach, and union member at a high school before entering politics. He successfully ran for governor in 2018 and was re-elected in 2022. Walz is sync with Kamala on key issues like same-sex marriage and abortion rights. Harris and Walz will spend the next 5 days touring critical battleground states, including Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada.
Wow.
Bureau Report, DD India.
The European Union is joining a number of countries around the world in warning the Venezuela government not to persecute the country's opposition figures. It comes as growing evidence builds against the incumbent president's claims that he won last month's election. DD India correspondent Alex Cadier reports from Brussels.
Well, it's been another warning directed at Nicolas Maduro, the incumbent president of Venezuela. Another warning by the European Union. The Foreign Affairs spokesperson Peter Stano saying that this has to stop and that Venezuela and the Maduro government has to stop the intimidation of the judiciary and the intimidation of the opposition. This is after Nicolas Maduro's Attorney General said he was launching an investigation against Edmundo Gonzalez, the lead opposition candidate in last month's election, and Maria Corina Machado, who was supposed to be the lead candidate but was banned by the Maduro authorities. That investigation, according to the Attorney General, a close ally of the incumbent President Maduro, was for incitement to intimidation. That is after those two opposition figures encouraged law enforcement to join the people's protest. So this clearly a tension in Venezuela being monitored very closely here in Brussels, a warning from the European Union to stop the intimidation of opposition figures in the country. And this comes as the Washington Post reported that they had seen 28,000 tally sheets, these physical sheets of paper where the votes were counted. They'd seen about 80% of all of them from across the country, and concluded that Mr. Gonzalez and Edmundo Gonzalez in the opposition had won nearly twice as many votes as Nicolas Maduro, who is still clinging on to power. So despite warnings from the EU, which echo warnings from the United States, from other South American countries like Chile and Brazil, despite all of those warnings, the big question will be, what will Nicolas Maduro do next? Alex Cadier in Brussels reporting for DD India.
A warning now to cyber criminals. The UK could be about to get a whole lot tougher on hacking. Researchers at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh in Scotland are leading the charge in developing a national quantum network set to revolutionise data security and put the UK at the forefront of quantum innovation. It's part of a government investment worth $196 million, and the cutting-edge tech will boost defences against cyber threats and connect future quantum computers, and the whole idea is to make it near unhackable. The cyber criminals would be hacked off with that. Shubhendu, back to you.
Step forward in the direction. Thanks very much, Ollie, with those updates joining us. And we return to our top story. UK is on the alert, bracing for more riots across the country, but it's not the UK alone. Similar trend of far-right violence is being observed in rest of Europe as well. For more on this, let's go across to DW correspondent Kate Ferguson in Berlin. Kate, like the United Kingdom, how big is the problem of far-right violence in Europe?
It's a serious problem. In both Germany and France, far-right attacks are rising. And in both of those countries, it's not just immigrants or Muslims that are being targeted, but also politicians of a more liberal persuasion. At the same time, support for right-wing political parties is also increasing, whether that's the Alternative for Germany here or the National Rally in France. And in fact, that potential link, so political rhetoric on one side and violence on the other, that has come under scrutiny in Europe, because in the UK, some of the rioters were heard chanting, "Stop the boats." That's a slogan the previous Conservative government had used to describe the very controversial plan to deport migrants to Rwanda. Now, Britain's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has since abandoned that policy, calling it dead and buried. But the sentiment behind it appears to be inspiring some of these violent protests.
And how are the authorities dealing with this disturbing trend?
Well, here in Germany, the government actually has an official strategy to fight right-wing extremism. It was unveiled earlier this year, and it includes measures like freezing bank accounts and combating hate speech and misinformation online. There's even a plan to use sports as a way to promote democratic values and entice people away from the far-right scene. Now, we should say this is quite urgent work. There are about 20,000 far-right crimes registered in Germany every year, and that trend is rising. But whether we're talking about Germany, France, the UK, or any other European country for that matter, politicians have to find a way to make the topic of immigration less inflammatory and to communicate its positive effects on the labour market, for example, while also listening to those who have genuine concerns. And in the current charged atmosphere, that is not always the easiest of tasks.
Kate, appreciate you joining us with those updates from Berlin. And still to come on DD India Global. Tragedy strikes Nepal as a helicopter crashes near Nuwakot. And Deer displays glitzy kuta dresses worn by stars in Olympics opening ceremony.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Some updates from Nepal. Floods and landslides triggered by heavy rains have wreaked chaos across the country. Landslide has killed 7 in Balung region, while 4 were rescued alive. Baglung, a hill district in Gandaki province, is the hardest hit by the monsoon turmoil. 8 people, including 6 children, perished in landslides at wards 9 and 10 of Badigar rural municipality on Tuesday morning. Floods and landslides have also disrupted various highways and road sections. The vehicular movement was obstructed in Kotang region of the Sagarmata highway as flood damage road inward 11 of Halesi Thwachung municipality. Another tragedy strikes Nepal as a helicopter crashed near Nuwakot, claiming the lives of 4 Chinese tourists and a Nepali pilot. The ill-fated aircraft was en route to Rasuwa district when it went down. Authorities have confirmed the deaths, with Nepali police investigating the cause of the crash. Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. Mexico has invited Russian President Vladimir Putin to October 1st inauguration of President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum. However, confirmation from the Russian side is still awaited. Putin congratulated Sheinbaum on her election victory in June, referring to Mexico as Russia's historically friendly partner in Latin America and indicating the countries have been developing close ties. A hotel located in the town of Krove in Germany partially collapsed, killing 2 people. More people are trapped inside the wreckage. Rescue efforts are underway with no information on the cause of the incident. Nigerians continue protesting against President Tinubu's financial reform policies. The demonstrators started a 10-day-long hardship protest, claiming that the president has not addressed any of their demands, despite making a call for dialogue and suspension of protests. Former First Lady of Argentina, Fabiola Yanez, has accused her husband Alberto Fernandez of gender violence as well as psychological harm and phone harassment. Following the accusations, court has prohibited Fernandez from leaving the country and from contacting Yanez. Time for sports. First up, all the action from Paris Olympics. In a big blow to India's medal hope, star wrestler Vinesh Phogat has been disqualified on Wednesday from the Paris Olympics after she was found overweight ahead of her women's 50 kg final match. Vinesh became the first Indian woman wrestler to reach the gold medal bout in the event on Tuesday. A statement issued by the Indian Olympic contingent said that Phogat had tipped the scales above 50 kg mark and was disqualified. Indian Sports Minister Mansukh Mandavia informed the Parliament that Indian Olympic Association has lodged a strong protest with United World Wrestling, and IOA President PT Usha is in Paris. Prime Minister spoke to her and asked her to take necessary action. The government provided every facility to her, including personal staff, for Olympics.
भारतीय ओलंपिक संघ ने अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कुश्ती संघ से कड़ा विरोध भी दर्ज किया है। नेशनल भारतीय ओलंपिक संघ की अध्यक्षा पीटी उषा भी अभी पेरिस में है। प्रधानमंत्री जी ने स्वयं उसके साथ बातचीत करके उचित कार्यवाही करने के लिए, उचित एक्शन लेने के लिए भी उसको कहा गया है।
Meanwhile, Indian wrestler Mirabai Chanu will compete in the 49 kg weightlifting event at Paris Olympics. Chanu, the lone Indian weightlifter at the Paris Games, will aim to improve the colour of a medal from the last Olympic Summer Games. After her historic podium finish in Tokyo Olympics, Mirabai won gold medal at the Commonwealth Games in 2022 and a silver at the 2022 IWF World Championship. However, Chanu has only lifted in 3 competitions since, due to injuries. She's placed 6th at the Asian Championship in 2023 and 4th at the Asian Games in 2023, where she suffered a hip injury that sidelined her for 5 months. La Galerie d'Or is displaying the outfits worn by Celine Dion, Lady Gaga and others at the opening ceremony of 2024 Paris Olympic Games. The looks donned by the Canadian singer Lady Gaga, Aya Nakamura, and Axel Saint-Sorel went on display on Wednesday at the Galerie d'Or exhibition space at the French House historic flagship on Avenue Montaigne in Paris. Sports and fashion together. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Global. Namaskar.